We're back. Yes, we are. Sports Day, tell a friend. JAKIB Sports YouTube Member each and every day, 12 to 3 Eastern. We just finished up with Dave Zingaro. If you miss any of our interviews, we had Jimmy Kempski yesterday. You just go to jakibsports.com. You can check out Gun on One there. Gunner, who was your guest this past week?
Yeah, Sal Palantonio, man. You know Sal. Sal tells it like it is, gives you insight that you sit there, you're going, I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
So, the numbers are doing great. Almost 9,000 already have reviewed it. If you haven't had a chance to talk to Sal or listen to me and Sal chop it up about football, Eagles, man, it's great conversation. So thank you for giving me that little prop there, Rob. Appreciate it.
That's why I'm here, man. So interestingly enough, speaking of Sal, he caught up with Jeffrey Lurie, as did Tim McManus from ESPN.com. And one of the things that Jeffrey Lurie had to say, which I thought was really interesting, was, essentially Jalen Hurts has nothing left to prove. Not that we didn't know that already, that there wasn't going to be, extension talks in the works this offseason for sure, guys. But, they're making no bones about it. And Jeffrey Lurie realizes that Howie has echoed those same sentiments. Like, basically, yep, he's going to get his. Here's what's interesting. So in 2023, this would end up being he's in his third year. Yeah, this would be the last year of his deal. Okay, the second round deal. Jalen Hurts would make $4.2 million in 2023. The average salary of Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, that crew, the guys who were making the upper echelon money, is $45 million.
Yep.
So you're talking about roughly about a $40+ million bump for Jalen Hurts with that extension. So it's going to be done, I believe. I don't think they're going to let this become a Lamar Jackson situation, and I don't think there's any kind of hostility there. Let me be really clear. I think they'll get it done, but there are going to be ramifications. There are going to be guys that are going to have to walk. And look, Howie's brilliant. I said yesterday, I think he will surprise us with the amount of people he's able to bring back and what he's able to do. But you're going to pay the price for this one. And this is why we always get back to this talking point, man. Win it this year, because nothing's guaranteed as young as Jalen is.
I think you said it, you said earlier on today that when you look at how the teams are constructed, you saw Russell Wilson never won after he got paid. You look at, a lot of teams like that. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast, and you just got to have somebody that's in place that can, bring guys in under cap-friendly deals, and how he's done that. It's not the same thing as what they did in LA with the Rams. They sold their soul. Now they're reaping the repercussions of them doing that by having all those huge contracts and bringing in older players and guys not performing that have gotten paid.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right, Barrett. He rarely does anything contractually that just destroys you or hamstrings you, the way that maybe some other GMs. I mean, they were even able to wiggle out of Carson Wentz. I know they paid a price that first year, with dead cap money and all that, but they got value in return and unloaded him. So, whatever this looks like, I know when the numbers come out after they get it done, we're all going to say, oh my God, he's making what? But I'm sure there's like escape clauses and, like ways for the Eagles not to be buried if things go sideways, which I don't anticipate, but you never know.
I think this has to be a very strategic move because of how they had themselves handcuffed temporarily with Carson, but this is a completely different beast. I think when they made this move to draft Jalen, they knew at that point in time that Carson was not what they were looking for. And that wasn't at a point when he was on the downslide of his career. That was at a point where maybe they identified something in his makeup, his demeanor, his inability to connect with guys in the locker room. That, hey, this is not going to benefit us for the long term.
You think that's why they drafted him in the second round?
I think that's
wow.
Think about it. Think about it, Barrett. They had just given Carson that big money, and then the next year they go out and draft with the second round another quarterback. When you already have your franchise quarterback in the fold.
Did they absolutely have to pay Carson during that time? That's what I want to know.
No, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't.
Pay him.
No. Okay.
But, they did it like a year before his rookie deal was up.
Yeah, they like to get ahead of it. Yeah.
So they stayed ahead of the curve. But then
which actually was good money considering the fact that Carson, he got way less than market value. Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, a year later, you go out and get another quarterback at number 2, and people are like, wait a minute, you had a lot more needs, and there were a lot of good players on the board, and you backed it. Now we're thinking at the time you drafted a player who's not getting off the bench for a few years at the very least, because you just paid this dude all this money. Then all of a sudden, stuff starts trickling out about Carson, the non-football player, and how almost got into a fisticuff with a player in the locker room. And then it comes out, changing plays, going against the grain, so on and so forth. So the Eagles obviously had to see something in his demeanor and his makeup they caught on to early on and knew they were going to be handcuffed, but were willing to take that risk. I mean, think about it, you don't get rid of your franchise quarterback right in the midst of his hefty contract unless there's a storyline behind the curtains that we're not privy to.
Right.
But stuff starts trickling out, okay? So you made that transition, and lo and behold, Jalen turns out to be 10 times better than what you thought in an accelerated rate, okay? So they look like geniuses because of how it transpired. Mm-hmm. But that's still, think about who does that, Barry? Who does that? You give one quarterback huge money, and the next year you take a second-round pick and bring in his backup? Not a wide receiver, not an edge rusher, not an offensive lineman. We know this team loves to stack yourself with trench warfare, first and foremost. They didn't go that route. Second-round pick is still a prime pick in the NFL. They get a guy.
We remember when they drafted him, we talked about that. In fact, when they drafted, me and you were on the show, and I looked over at you. You looked at me like, what?
Exactly. What are you doing here?
Right.
I mean, you look at a team like Green Bay. They're notorious for doing this.
Yeah.
They draft Aaron Rodgers. He sits on the bench for 3 years. They draft Jordan Love. He sits on the bench for 4 years. Those are first-round picks they waste.
Yeah.
This team just gave dude a mega contract, which was still a friendly contract, but they knew they were going to take a major hit, which was like, what, $36 million, the hit they ended up taking?
Yep.
And you got a young dude who's sitting here who bounced around from Alabama to Oklahoma, and you identify him. And nobody had him projected as a second-round pick, first of all. Let's start there. Nobody had him at the very earliest.
They overdrafted in a lot of people's minds. Yeah.
Matter of fact, they said at the very earliest he would go as in the 3rd round. He had all these deficiencies. He wasn't ready for the pro game, needed all this. And you took him in the 2nd round?
Well, I think there was 2 things, Derek. I think one, it was clear with the injury history with Wentz that, you had to have insurance, like a really good insurance policy, not just some guy you plug in. So I think that played into it. And I also think you're right. Like they knew some of the whispers. They knew some of the issues. They knew people had beefs with this guy. And he was someone who wasn't, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, who didn't connect with everybody in the locker room. There was a certain faction of people that he connected with. And it's not a white-black thing. It was Jordan Matthews was one of his best friends. It was a personality thing. And I don't think he connected with the team entirely. And when you're a quarterback, that's bad. It's of any position. That's the worst one to be that way. And I think it was 2 things. I think one, they were worried about him being hurt all the time. And they knew in the back of their mind, this dude could, go off the rails here. We can't have it.
So kudos to the organization for identifying that long before we saw it. While we're still sitting here with our mouths open about the move they made, and of course we're writing about it, we're talking about it on various platforms about what are the Eagles doing. Here's another Howie move that's going to blow up in his face. What are you thinking? Kudos to them for staying the course and letting it play itself out. And sure enough, Carson turned out to be exactly what they foresaw him to be. Someone that players would not follow or jump off a cliff with. Those who went against the grain, he divided the locker room to a certain degree, okay? Because, they talked about how he had his little clique of players and everybody else was on the outside looking in. That's not what a leader does. A leader embraces everybody. Whether you agree with them or not, a leader embraces anybody. And we already know the quarterback is the one position in football where you have to have that consummate leader where everybody will go through fire, earthquake, storms, floods, monsoons, come hell or high water to follow. Carson Wentz was not that guy, but we couldn't see that. It was way too early for us to see that, but they identified that. So kudos to them for doing it.
Absolutely. I had heard rumblings about it. I remember me and Derek was just sitting down talking about it in the office. And man, guess what I heard? And so guess what I heard? We go bounce stories off back and forth. And, you know, as time went on, those stories, you know, started showing up and, you know, and people writing stories about it. I'm like, whoa, you know, and this is really damning to $100 million quarterback. And, you know, I just didn't quite understand why they would pay him. And they knew this was, you know, who he was in the beginning. I mean, what was that cause? I mean, did they think that he was going to change or they could change him?
I think some of it's denial, Barrett. I think some of it is just sort of like ignoring the problem and hoping it goes away because maybe he's uber talented, you know. And then when the injury started happening and, you know, everything changed, you know, everything started to change with this guy and he couldn't get away with some of the stuff and everything starts to snowball and it just became a mess.
I will never forget when Joe Santoliquito wrote that story about Carson, about all the backdoor stuff, about him almost getting into fisticuffs with Darren Sproles and all this stuff. And people lambasted this dude up and down the walkway.
He got killed.
Death threats. He had death threats. Okay. Death threats over a story.
Derek, I talked to him that day and he was, you know, he was upset, right? And you know, look, and Joe's been doing this a long time and he knows, you know, I give him props. He keeps it real, you know, with what he writes. He's not pandering to anybody. But he said, you know, this is nuts. Like, all I'm doing is reporting what I'm being told by people in that locker room. Okay.
People in the know.
Yeah. And people went nuts and took it way too far with him. And he was really, it was wrong, man. It really was wrong.
He took a bold step of faith and put something out there for the public that I had known about, but I wasn't going to be the first one to break that story. Okay. Yep. And I told him, I said, Joe, stick to your gun. If you're going to put that story out, and you know, Joe will tell you himself, we should get him on the show. Joe will tell you himself. He texted me, D-Gun, what do you think? I said, dude, stick to your guns. I said, you're going to take a heat for this. Stick to your gun. Yep. And sure enough, people went after this dude like a dog going after raw meat. And the fact that people actually had death threats, and I want to know how many of those people actually had the gumption to actually go back when it all unraveled and say, hey man, I apologize for what I said to you. I guarantee you none of them.
Well, I can tell you something like that. I was doing WIP that day. I was doing afternoons and I had him on. We had a conversation in the morning and I said, look, I'm putting you on, man. I'm going to let you give your side of this thing. And I got your back. I don't care what they're saying, what everybody's saying. Tell me what you just report what you're hearing. And he did. And, you know, and the callers were going crazy on him and crushing him and all that. But look, what he wrote stood the test of time. And he was the first one to be willing to step out on that ledge, man, and it paid dividends. Now, take it to polar opposite. That's what's one of the things that's so great about Jalen Hurts, not only with the way he plays, but not only is there none of that drama, this guy leads. And the older guys want to be led by him. Older players who've been around forever want to lead. They quote this guy. He's got something different there. That's a trait that you need to have at that position. It's why they're paid $45 million a year. And Jalen has that in abundance. Believe me.
When you're 24 years old and you can command the respect of your older peers who have earned their red badges of courage, who have sacrificed their bodies, and they're looking at this kid and, you know, it's a side eye. You know how it is. You're an older player. This kid's going to lead us, but you lead by example. You don't lead by your mouth. You lead by example first and foremost. And then once you've shown that you can handle that pressure, then all of a sudden you can start asserting yourself verbally. And that's exactly what this kid did. He knew what to say, when to say it, what not to say, when not to say it. He let his actions speak louder than words. Were there some rough patches last year in 21? Absolutely. But they saw the bigger picture. His demeanor never changed. He gravitated towards everybody in the locker room. And I guarantee you, players started calling around and talking, hey, man, tell me about this Jalen Hurts dude. What should I know? Hey, man, this dude's legit. Let me tell you something. What you get in the locker room, what you get in practice, he's the same dude. He's never going to be bigger than the moment. He's never going to put himself before the team. And as you've seen, the way he talks to the media, the way he presents himself, that's exactly who he is. It's never about me. It's about we, you know, and once he starts, especially this year, veteran players follow that dude into war anywhere, anytime, man. That's what a leader does. There's not many 24-year-olds that have that kind of trait. And I don't care if it's the Trevor Lawrences. I don't care who it is. You know, when you're 23, 24, they always tell you, you got to pay your dues first. And they go through the highs and the lows. and they take their lumps, and players listen to them because you have to in the huddle to get your play and your assignment. But in terms of just basically saying, I put this dude on my shoulder, it doesn't happen, man. You got to pay some dues first. But not with Jalen. He earned that right almost immediately when he stepped in that huddle.
Yeah, he did. He did.
He showed everybody, man. He showed everybody, and that's what makes Jalen a leader on that team. Let me also say this: just because a quarterback comes in doesn't necessarily mean that you respect him or you like him. They respect him and like him. They love that guy. I played with quarterbacks that people didn't like them. You know what I'm saying? They didn't want to be around them, and they wouldn't follow them. Even though they were the quarterback of the team, they would tolerate them. You know, I've been around those type of situations where you didn't have a, I'll follow you and I'll get in the foxhole with you and we can find our way out. I played on teams that didn't have that relationship with the quarterback. So, just to put things in perspective, just because you're the leader on that team doesn't mean you lead and people will follow you. Sometimes just your title alone of being the starting quarterback, they'll tolerate you. But they generally love this kid. They want to fight for this kid. They'll do anything. And that's defensive guys also. That's coaches. That's everybody in the organization. They will go out there and fight a brick wall over Jalen Hurts. And like I said, I've had quarterbacks that, man, they wouldn't go 2 feet for you. I mean, he'd be on fire. They wouldn't piss on him. You know what I'm saying? I've been around quarterbacks like that. I've been around players like that, man. So it's a rare trait to be and have that much command of a locker room, especially this early.
Yeah. I think, and the other thing is, like, we always say, well, his dad was a coach. He played at Alabama. He played at Oklahoma. Yeah, and that's all true. He was his true freshman starter at Alabama, and that helped mold him. But let's give him some credit too. And I mean, I know how I was at 24, how immature I was. And granted, I wasn't like, I didn't have the responsibilities. I wasn't, in charge of running a football team like he is. So maybe that changes things a little bit. But this guy is way beyond his years. Yeah, he deserves credit for that himself, as opposed to everybody else around him. So, it's amazing. It is, and it's so different from the last guy. It's just so different in that locker room. And all the guys who have been there through both know it. They really do. They know the difference, with these two guys. All right. Speaking of that, guys, I wanted to hit you with this. So I know ultimately the answer is, unless they win it, they can't be in the same conversation. But let's go under the assumption that this team wins against the Chiefs on Sunday. Better team, the 17 team that won it against the Patriots, or this team for you guys? Now, they played one less game in 17, so they were 16-3. This team would be 17-3 if they win. So there's a little bit of advantage there for this team. But that team overcame a lot more injuries to get to where they are. They beat the GOAT coach and the GOAT quarterback. This team will beat a Hall of Famer in Andy Reid and a Hall of Famer likely in Mahomes. In your estimation, greater team, 17-22.
I would venture to say that I think this team is better constructed than that team in 2017.
Okay.
The depth that they had is right up in line with the depth they had in 2017. I mean, they had Hicks go out. They had so many guys go out. They had JP go out, Sproles go out, Carson go out. And they had backups that came in and played just as well as the starters did, or they played well enough that they could win games with them. I still think that this team, way it's constructed this year, is still more talented, even with the backups. They could come in and play, just as well as anybody else. I think Big V was a better backup tackle than we have right now. I don't think that Jack Driscoll can hold Big V. He's not as good as Big V, but I truly believe he's, the offensive line is better than just a tad bit better than the line they had in 2017, simply because all the starters are there. They didn't have all the starters in 2017 because they had Big V playing there. They also had a backup in what was his name? Oh my goodness,
Wisniewski.
Wisniewski, yeah, they had Wisniewski starting. So I didn't think that Brooksy, I mean, that right side with Brooks and Lane was a monster right side, but the left side was kind of lacking because you had Wisniewski and Big V there, but you still had Kelsey there. So I'll say the edge goes to this year's offensive line. Quarterback position, I still think Jalen is better than Foles, even though Foles won it all, because he had his last 2 games were the greatest games probably ever played by a Philadelphia Eagles quarterback.
And most clutch. Yeah.
Yes. You know, so those 2 games, you know, the Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game was the best games I've ever seen played by an Eagles quarterback. But then you look at the previous 2 or 3 games, he didn't play well at all. You know what I'm saying? So I think that, you know, Jalen has the better he's the better quarterback. Running back position, I think it's a wash. Receiver position is no question better receivers with the Eagles this year than it was in 2017. I'll take those guys over anything. Tight end position, see, that's tough because I'd have to go with 2017 because you had
Ertz and Selleck. Yeah.
Ertz, Selleck, and then you had Philly
Trey Burton, who threw a touchdown.
Yeah, so I'd have to go with those guys as being the better tight end position. You have better players at the tight end position. Defensively, defensive line, this year is the best defensive line I've seen in a long time. Linebackers, that might be a wash. Cornerbacks has to go with 2023, these guys here. And then the safety position, you got to go with 2017.
Yep. Yeah. Well, so all in all, which team would you take? All that said,
I would take this year's team. Yeah, I would take this year's team.
Gunnar, you too?
I'm glad Barrett went first. It gave me a little bit longer time to think about this. This team, the way it was constructed, the depth, the versatility, is expected to do great things because of the numbers it piled up. This team, I think, would beat the 17 team if they went head-to-head.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I would say 17 was the greater story because of the perseverance and the obstacles they had to overcome. Nobody gave them a chance. Nobody. That's when they rallied around that underdog mentality. They don't like us, we don't care mentality.
Right.
And if we're sitting here being honest, we didn't think they would get to the Super Bowl. We didn't think they had a chance, and you know what, to beat the evil empire in a Super Bowl matchup, considering the history that New England had piled up during that time of getting the Super Bowls and winning. So in terms of overall team, because of the underdog mentality, I would have to lean towards 17. You know, and you're saying based on the fact that the Eagles win this one, well, they're the favorites. As slight as it may be, they're the slight favorites to win this one, and rightfully so. When you look at the numbers they have piled up on both sides of the football, especially on defense, unheard of numbers. 78 sacks in the season, approaching 80 sacks in the season. That's unheard of in the modern era of pro football. But I would have to lean towards 17 because of what they went through, the landmines they had to overcome and step around to get through, to get to where they got that year.
Yeah, I would say 17's road more challenging for sure thus far. I would say more talent overall, this one.
No question.
I'd probably lean to this one. I would. Now, the question is, are you going to need a performance like Foles gave you on the big stage on Sunday, and is Jalen up to it? If Jalen's up to it and he shows you that, I think it cements that it's this year. But if he doesn't, if he can't go toe-to-toe with Mahomes the way that Foles went with Brady, then I'd probably swing it back to 17.
Right.
Kind of where I'm at with it. I think it's a great argument, man. I mean,
that's 17, a tough way. That's a
17
tough
was
thing
more
to call,
of an
bro.
underdog thing than this one was. It was more of an underdog. I would say.
Yes. The expectations are they're going to win it all. We had no idea. I mean, we were losing in the second game of the year versus the Giants. It took a 63-yard kick for us to beat the Giants that year.
Yeah.
To get things rolling. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't until that 63-yard run by LeGarrette Blount that really turned on the running game for this team against the Chargers. I mean, there's so many things that took place for that year that, I mean, it was just an incredible ride, man, an incredible ride. You know, and I mean, Carson Wentz's play against Washington, how he was in the middle of everybody converging on him, and everybody was wrapped around him, and he bust out through that hole and runs for the first down. You know, little things like that.
Yeah.
You know, Sanders rookie year catching that pass for the touchdown, in the side corner. I mean, there were so many things that you know, not saying this, but it was a Corey Clement.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was crazy how good.
I think John asks a good question. What if the defense only gives up 14 to 17 points to this offense? That's a fair point. You know, if they win the game and the defense stifles them, then I would still lean to this team, because that would just show you how great this defense is. You know, that other defense gave up 33 points, didn't punt, 500 total yards to Brady. So yeah,
he was carving them.
He was carving them. He was. There's no question about that. Look, anyway, it's
imagine if they'd have lost though, Rob. Imagine if they'd have lost. If they'd have lost, can you believe how much pressure, how much of a smear would be on the defensive coordinator
Schwartz?
Can you imagine how that would have come out?
Barrett, think how much pressure would be on this team had they still been searching for their first Super Bowl. Seriously, man. I mean, you know, and then you go into it as of right now, at least as the favorite in the game,
yes,
which they weren't in that New England game. You had the best record in your conference all year. Yeah, man. There's not that there isn't any pressure on this team. There always is when you play in a Super Bowl, but there would be a crazy amount of heat on this team, just trying to finally get the city its first Super Bowl. But yeah, fun debate there, man, kicking that thing around. We'll come back, guys, and we will get into the key guys that you need to contain / stop, and who could be an underrated weapon from the Chiefs that we're not talking about enough. We'll get into all that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We're Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Barrett, Derek, Rob. All right, let's talk about Pro Action Restoration. Pro Action Restoration is who you contact if your home, your business, a property you may own goes through the inconvenience, the pain of water, fire, smoke, mold damage, any of the above. Pro Action Restoration is on call 24 hours, 7 days a week to assist. I know it because I called them on a Saturday, and they got right out to my parents' house. They cleaned up the problem. Price was right. The crew was great. I mean, it was just an unbelievable experience. It was a big sigh of relief more than anything else. They are licensed, bonded, fully insured. They've been serving the tri-state area for more than 2 decades. Pro Action Restoration will work in conjunction with your insurance company also. So again, water, fire, smoke, mold remediation. If you're not really sure, if you're having some kind of issue and you're thinking, I don't know, I can't clean this up myself, reach out to them. 610-623-3760, 610-623-3760, or online at proactionrestoration.com. That's proactionrestoration.com.